The world was stunned this morning as shocking reports emerged. Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, has reportedly been arrested following an extraordinary scandal involving alleged forged birth documents of his children, Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana. For decades, the British royal family has been a symbol of tradition, discipline, and unyielding adherence to protocol. But today, that carefully constructed image appears to have been shattered. News outlets across the globe are scrambling to verify the story, while social media is ablaze with speculation, outrage, and disbelief. The question on everyone's lips is simple, yet terrifying. How could one of the most photographed and scrutinized figures in the world find himself at the center of a potential criminal investigation? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. This is not just a story about a prince caught in legal trouble. It is a story that cuts to the very core of the monarchy, its values, its traditions, and its unspoken codes. For years, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have been the subjects of intense media scrutiny, with public opinions swinging wildly from admiration to harsh criticism. But the current situation escalates far beyond tabloids and gossip columns. This scandal is legal, ethical, and personal all at once. Allegations that birth documents were tampered with or falsified, a crime with significant legal ramifications, have thrown the royal household into a whirlwind of internal turmoil and public scrutiny. And at the heart of it all is Harry, the very prince who has been portrayed as a modernizer and a rebel, now facing one of the most serious allegations imaginable for a member of the British monarchy. Imagine for a moment the scenario unfolding behind palace walls. Senior members of the royal family, King Charles, Prince William, Princess Anne, and their closest advisors, are said to be convening emergency meetings, assessing the extent of the damage, and weighing their options. Loyalty and bloodline, the twin pillars upon which royal protocol stands, are suddenly under siege. Reports suggest that this is no ordinary scandal that can be quietly resolved behind closed doors. The evidence allegedly points to deliberate attempts to misrepresent the legal status of Harry's children, with implications not just for the Duke of Sussex, but for the monarchy itself. Every decision, every public statement, every move could reverberate for years to come. This is the kind of scandal that defines an era, one that will be analyzed, dissected, and debated for decades. From a historical perspective, the British monarchy has survived wars, political upheavals, and personal controversies. But rarely has a member been publicly accused of criminal acts while actively undermining the legal framework that governs succession and royal privileges. Birth documentation, though it may seem mundane to the average citizen, carries immense weight within the royal hierarchy. These documents determine the legitimacy of heirs, the line of succession, and the distribution of titles and privileges that have been protected for centuries. If even a hint of forgery is confirmed, the ramifications could be unprecedented. Children denied their rightful titles, a prince facing prosecution, and the monarchy grappling with a crisis of trust that could resonate both domestically and internationally. The public reaction to these early reports has been nothing short of explosive. Social media platforms are flooded with speculation, memes, and hot takes ranging from sympathetic defenses of the Duke to outright condemnation. Some analysts suggest that this scandal could irreparably damage Harry's standing, painting him as someone willing to flout the law for personal gain or convenience. Others argue that this may be a misrepresentation of the facts, a miscommunication amplified by the global media machine. Yet the palace's silence, or carefully calculated statements, has only fueled speculation. A crisis this severe does not allow for casual oversight. Every leaked report, every unofficial comment, every insider revelation is magnified exponentially. Amid the chaos, one question lingers more than any other. What does this mean for the children? Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, young and vulnerable, are caught in a storm that they neither caused nor understand. Their legal status, previously considered secure, is now uncertain. If the allegations of document tampering are verified, the implications for their royal titles, inheritance rights, and public perception could be staggering. Imagine growing up in a world where your very identity, your legitimacy, and your place in history is being questioned publicly. The emotional toll on these young lives is almost unimaginable, yet it is an unavoidable part of the narrative that has now unfolded. This introduction would be incomplete without acknowledging the international dimension of the scandal. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, after all, have long resided in the United States, far from the daily life of the British monarchy. This geographical distance, once seen as a means of gaining independence and privacy, now complicates matters legally and diplomatically. Cross-border legal frameworks, international scrutiny, and media coverage from both sides of the Atlantic converge to create a pressure cooker situation. The Duke's arrest, therefore, is not merely a local affair. It has global ramifications. Governments, legal authorities, and royal watchers worldwide are watching closely, assessing every development, every detail, and every implication. Yet, as gripping as these facts are, it is the human element that renders this scandal truly compelling. A prince, once celebrated as a modernizing force, is now facing potential criminal liability. A family, bound by centuries of tradition and expectation, is navigating uncharted waters. A public, accustomed to carefully curated images of royal life, is suddenly confronted with raw, unfiltered chaos. The unfolding drama is more than a news story. It is a case study in power, privilege, and the consequences of choices made behind closed doors. As we delve deeper into this story, viewers will gain a front-row seat to the events that have shaken the royal household. We will explore the origins of the alleged document forgery, examine Harry's alleged involvement, and dissect the palace's response. Experts in law, psychology, and royal protocol will weigh in, providing context and insight. Social and cultural implications will be explored, revealing how this scandal resonates far beyond the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace. From media scrutiny to international diplomacy, every facet of this story contributes to a narrative that is as complex as it is dramatic. In the next segments of this video, we will examine each chapter of this unfolding saga. From the discovery of the tampered documents to Harry's arrest, from Meghan's response to the palace's internal deliberations, from the legal implications to the emotional fallout for the children, every detail will be meticulously analyzed. By the end, you will have a comprehensive understanding of how a single act, or alleged act, can ripple across institutions, families, and even entire nations. This is a story about trust and betrayal, about privilege and responsibility, about tradition colliding with modernity in the most public of arenas. And it begins, quite literally, with the shocking revelation that one of the world's most famous princes may have committed a crime that could alter the course of the monarchy forever. The origins of this shocking scandal reportedly trace back months, if not years, to a series of unusual administrative discrepancies and unusual filings regarding Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana's official birth records. Sources close to the palace suggest that concerns were initially raised quietly, in hushed conversations among advisors and legal counsel, long before the story erupted into public view. What makes this situation particularly incendiary is the suggestion that the discrepancies were not accidental clerical errors, but deliberate alterations, allegedly orchestrated or at least covered up by Prince Harry himself. To understand the gravity, it is essential to grasp the role these documents play within the monarchy. Birth certificates are not mere forms. They are legal recognition of identity, legitimacy, and entitlement. In the royal context, they determine who may inherit titles, claim privileges, and even ascend the throne in extraordinary circumstances. Any tampering, therefore, strikes at the very structure of monarchy. Royal insiders describe an atmosphere of tension and disbelief within the palace. The very notion that one of their own could be implicated in document forgery is unprecedented. King Charles, reportedly furious, convened a series of emergency meetings with senior officials to assess both the legal implications and the public relations fallout. Prince William, who has long been portrayed as the guardian of tradition and duty, is said to have demanded answers and a full accounting of the Duke of Sussex's actions. Friends of the family have described tense phone calls and hurried private meetings, with palace aides struggling to maintain calm while preparing for an unprecedented crisis. Even Princess Anne, renowned for her forthrightness and commitment to protocol, is reportedly deeply concerned about the long-term impact on the monarchy's credibility. At the same time, Harry's arrest introduces a complicated interplay between public perception, media scrutiny, and legal process. In today's hyper-connected world, news travels instantaneously, and speculation often shapes opinion even before facts are fully established. The image of a prince handcuffed and processed by authorities challenges centuries of decorum, transforming what was once a private family matter into a global spectacle. The arrest raises serious questions. Will the Duke face charges in the United Kingdom or the United States? How will legal authorities handle the cross-border complications, considering the Sussexes' relocation to California? And perhaps most poignantly, what does this mean for Harry's relationship with the monarchy going forward? The human side of the story cannot be overstated. For Archie and Lilibet, the implications are deeply personal. While still very young, their identities and statuses are now under scrutiny in a way no child should ever experience. Friends of the family have expressed concern about the psychological impact on the children, who, until now, had largely been shielded from the full glare of the public eye. Imagine being in their shoes, a life of privilege suddenly overshadowed by uncertainty, your legitimacy questioned in the press, your parents embroiled in one of the most sensational scandals of the century. It is a precarious position that invites both public sympathy and judgment, underscoring the complex dynamics at play. Adding further layers to this scandal is Meghan Markle's potential involvement or response. While initial reports focus squarely on Harry, insiders hint that Meghan has been closely monitoring developments and consulting with legal experts. Her global public image, already contentious due to prior controversies, is now inevitably intertwined with this legal and familial maelstrom. Sources suggest she is walking a delicate line, balancing support for her husband with the need to maintain distance from allegations that could implicate her directly. The media's portrayal of Meghan in this context is already polarized, with commentators predicting intense scrutiny in the coming weeks. International reactions are equally noteworthy. British citizens, accustomed to royal scandals ranging from marital disagreements to financial controversies, are witnessing an event that is legally and morally significant on an unprecedented scale. Governments and media outlets worldwide are weighing in, often speculating on what the arrest could mean for diplomatic relations, the monarchy's soft power, and public confidence in royal institutions. Analysts suggest that the ramifications extend beyond the immediate family. They touch upon the monarchy's relationship with common law, international law, and even public perception in a modern democratic society. Critics of Prince Harry have been quick to voice opinions, framing the arrest as a culmination of reckless behavior. Some suggest that Harry's desire for independence from royal expectations, combined with a long-standing tension between tradition and personal freedom, contributed to decisions that are now being legally scrutinized. Others caution against drawing hasty conclusions, emphasizing that allegations are not convictions and that due process must unfold before judgments are finalized. Nevertheless, the damage to reputation, both personal and institutional, is immediate. Within the palace, the debate over how to respond continues. Advisors reportedly consider multiple strategies, from public denouncement to silent disownment. Some argue that issuing a statement of support, emphasizing the need for due process, could mitigate backlash. Others contend that swift and decisive action, removing titles, revoking privileges, and severing formal ties, may be necessary to preserve the integrity of the institution. Every choice carries profound implications, and the stakes could not be higher. The arrest also invites reflection on broader societal themes. The intersection of privilege and accountability, the tension between private family matters and public scrutiny, and the role of law in regulating even the most exalted citizens. For centuries, the British monarchy has operated within its own unique framework, insulated in many ways from the ordinary legal and social pressures that govern other citizens. Today, however, that insulation is challenged. The unfolding events may set precedents for how royals navigate legal responsibilities, transparency, and public expectations in an increasingly connected and scrutinized world. As this video continues, viewers will be taken on a detailed journey through every aspect of this unfolding saga. We will explore the alleged document forgery itself, examining how authorities discovered inconsistencies, the legal ramifications, and the specific actions attributed to Prince Harry. We will delve into the royal family's response, including the internal deliberations, public statements, and the possible long-term consequences for relationships and succession. Insights from legal experts, royal analysts, and cultural commentators will provide context, helping viewers understand not only what happened but why it matters so profoundly. The story of Prince Harry's arrest is, in many ways, a story of contrasts: tradition versus modernity, public image versus private actions, privilege versus accountability. It is a cautionary tale that resonates far beyond the gilded walls of the palace, reflecting timeless questions about power, responsibility, and the consequences of one's choices. By examining the full scope of events, from the initial discovery of document discrepancies to the arrest itself, from palace deliberations to public reaction, we begin to understand the profound stakes at play, both for the individuals involved and for the institution of monarchy itself. And yet, as gripping as these developments are, they also leave us with pressing questions. What motivated these alleged actions? How far does loyalty to family extend when legality is at risk? And perhaps most critically, what does the future hold for a prince whose very identity and status are now under scrutiny? These questions set the stage for the chapters to follow, each of which will dissect the unfolding scandal in meticulous detail, providing clarity, insight, and the kind of storytelling that brings this unprecedented event to life. In short, the arrest of Prince Harry is not just a headline. It is a seismic event that touches on law, family, power, and the human experience. It is a story that demands attention, reflection, and understanding. And as we continue, you will see why this scandal may very well redefine the boundaries of the British monarchy, forever altering the lives of those at its center. The discovery of the alleged tampered birth documents reportedly began with routine checks by officials in both the United Kingdom and the United States, highlighting the increasingly interconnected nature of royal administrative oversight. Though birth certificates are often treated as mundane legal documents, the royal context elevates them to matters of state significance. According to sources close to the investigation, discrepancies were first noticed in the official registry records maintained in the UK, which did not align precisely with submissions made in California. These discrepancies, while subtle at first glance, raised red flags because of the precise nature with which royal documentation is typically maintained. Experts in legal and governmental administration were immediately called in to analyze the records, seeking to understand whether errors were clerical in nature or indicative of deliberate falsification. The investigation quickly expanded once initial anomalies were flagged. Authorities in the United States reportedly coordinated with British legal teams to cross-check the submitted records, examining signatures, notarizations, and related filings. Experts analyzing the documents noted inconsistencies in key details, such as the timing of registration, the formats used, and certain procedural signatures that appeared either out of sequence or inconsistent with standard legal practice. For example, dates on the American certificates did not match hospital records, and some entries were written in a style atypical of official notary documentation. Although small administrative errors are not uncommon, the pattern of irregularities suggested something far more deliberate. Legal advisors and investigators reportedly began to suspect that Prince Harry had been actively involved in attempting to cover up these irregularities. According to insiders, the Duke of Sussex's legal team had been in communication with registry offices for months, ostensibly to clarify records. Yet these communications contained language and requests that investigators now view as highly unusual, indicating a level of intervention that exceeded routine verification. Some reports suggest that Harry may have personally overseen the alterations, although whether this constituted direct forgery or coordination with third-party agents remains a subject of intense scrutiny. The initial reaction within the palace was reportedly one of shock and disbelief. While rumors of scandal involving royals often circulate in the media, the very idea of a birth document forgery goes to the heart of legitimacy, succession, and legal integrity. Palace insiders indicate that King Charles convened immediate emergency meetings with senior officials and legal counsel to assess both the evidence and the potential impact on public trust. Prince William, traditionally seen as a protector of monarchy protocols, is said to have been visibly furious upon learning of the initial findings. Sources describe heated private discussions about whether the matter could be resolved quietly or whether swift, public action was necessary to preserve the institution's credibility. As the investigation progressed, more details began to emerge, suggesting that the alleged forgery was not isolated to a single document, but potentially involved multiple filings connected to both Archie and Lilibet. In addition to birth certificates, authorities reportedly examined related documents such as medical affidavits, notarized parental declarations, and registry correspondences. Experts in document verification noted certain anomalies, including ink inconsistencies, altered signatures, and unusual formatting errors that would rarely appear in legitimate official records. Forensic document examiners have reportedly been brought in to provide conclusive analysis, further intensifying the legal and media scrutiny surrounding the case. Public response began to escalate as leaks and preliminary reports emerged. Media outlets worldwide reported on the investigation, often framing it as one of the most serious legal challenges ever faced by a British royal. Social media platforms exploded with debate, with commentators questioning the integrity of the Sussexes, the robustness of royal oversight, and the implications for the monarchy as a whole. Public opinion, long divided regarding Harry and Meghan, began to polarize further. Supporters of the Duke emphasized the need for due process and cautioned against assuming guilt, while critics interpreted the allegations as confirmation of long-held suspicions about recklessness and secrecy. At the same time, legal authorities faced the complex challenge of navigating international jurisdiction. With Archie and Lilibet's records spanning 2 countries, and the Sussexes residing in California, questions arose about which legal framework should govern proceedings. Experts indicate that both British and American authorities have certain powers to investigate, especially when documents cross international lines or involve misrepresentation. Some speculate that this case could set a precedent for how cross-border legal discrepancies involving royals are handled in the future. Palace on edge, with aides, counselors, and senior members struggling to coordinate responses and maintain order. Discussions reportedly centered on 2 primary strategies. 1. Issuing a strong public statement condemning any wrongdoing and distancing the monarchy from the Duke of Sussex. And 2. Attempting to manage the situation discreetly to prevent further erosion of public trust. Both approaches carried risk. Open condemnation could exacerbate media frenzy, while quiet handling risked appearing complicit in concealing potential criminal behavior. In parallel, questions regarding Meghan Markle's involvement or awareness of the document issues began to circulate. While initial focus has been squarely on Prince Harry, insiders suggest that her global public image and active role in family matters make it almost inevitable that media scrutiny will extend to her. Legal teams are reportedly preparing responses to potential inquiries, emphasizing that speculation does not equate to culpability. Nevertheless, public perception may influence the broader narrative, affecting both personal reputation and international interest in the story. The stakes extend beyond legal accountability. The alleged forgery challenges core aspects of legitimacy and succession within the royal family. While Archie and Lilibet are currently far from the line of succession, their official status determines not only titles, but also access to privileges and ceremonial roles. Any revelation that their documents were tampered with could spark questions about broader implications for inheritance, ceremonial precedents, and public trust in royal transparency. Legal scholars and royal historians alike note that the symbolic importance of such records cannot be understated. They represent continuity, legitimacy, and authority. Moreover, the situation illustrates a profound tension between modern royal life and traditional expectations. Prince Harry, in particular, has long sought a degree of independence from the constraints of protocol, advocating for a life in which personal freedom and public responsibility are balanced differently from previous generations. However, this pursuit of autonomy may have collided with the immutable requirements of legal accountability. The investigation underscores that privilege does not exempt one from the responsibilities that accompany titles, especially when public and legal interests intersect. As authorities continued their work, additional sources reportedly came forward, including individuals familiar with administrative processes and document verification, providing further evidence of irregularities. The accumulation of evidence, combined with the increasingly public nature of the investigation, set the stage for an eventual arrest. Legal commentators suggest that the arrest is both a consequence of the document discrepancies and a reflection of law enforcement's commitment to treating even the highest-ranking individuals as accountable under the law. In the midst of this scrutiny, the royal family's internal dynamics are also shifting. Relationships between Harry and other family members are reportedly strained to an unprecedented degree. Prince William, King Charles, and senior advisors face the challenge of balancing familial loyalty with institutional responsibility. Decisions about titles, privileges, and public representation are being reconsidered, with some sources indicating that the Sussexes' formal ties to the monarchy could be permanently altered. The arrest, therefore, is not only a legal event but also a turning point in family dynamics, altering the relationships, loyalties, and public perception of all involved. The unfolding story of the forged documents represents a convergence of legality, family dynamics, and public perception. It highlights the fragility of reputation, the consequences of secrecy, and the importance of transparency in both private and public spheres. While the investigation continues, the broader implications are already clear. Trust, legitimacy, and accountability are at the center of this storm, and the actions of one individual, Prince Harry, have triggered a crisis with consequences that may reverberate for years. From the initial discovery of discrepancies to the arrest itself, this chapter of the saga illustrates how meticulous scrutiny, legal oversight, and media attention intersect to create a situation that is both complex and profoundly consequential. Every detail, from notary signatures to registry dates, carries weight, and every action taken by the Duke and his legal team has been dissected by authorities and commentators alike. As we proceed, understanding the full context of these documents, the investigative process, and the immediate fallout is critical to grasping the gravity of the scandal. In summary, the discovery of the alleged forged birth documents was the catalyst for one of the most sensational royal investigations in modern history. What began as routine verification evolved into a comprehensive inquiry, implicating Prince Harry in a matter that strikes at both legal and familial foundations. The consequences are far-reaching, affecting public trust, family relationships, international jurisdiction, and the perception of royal privilege. This investigation, which has culminated in Harry's arrest, represents a convergence of law, tradition, and media spectacle that will define this chapter of the royal narrative for years to come. The day of Prince Harry's arrest began with a flurry of unprecedented activity, both in legal circles and within the royal household. While details surrounding the exact timing of the arrest remain closely guarded, multiple sources indicate that law enforcement coordinated across international borders to ensure the process was conducted within the bounds of both British and American law. Given the high-profile nature of the suspect, extensive precautions were reportedly taken to protect the privacy and security of all parties involved, including the Duke himself, the officers executing the arrest, and potential witnesses. Unlike typical criminal procedures, the arrest of a royal family member drew immediate global attention, and the stakes were elevated to a level rarely seen in modern legal history. According to insider accounts, the arresting officers first made contact with Harry at his California residence, seeking to inform him of the legal charges related to the alleged falsification of Archie and Lilibet's birth documents. Legal advisors accompanying Harry reportedly requested the opportunity to review the evidence before any formal detention could occur. Nevertheless, law enforcement officials emphasized the seriousness of the charges, citing the clear inconsistencies in official documents, the potential intent to mislead governmental authorities, and the gravity of interfering with birth certificates, a matter considered a direct affront to legal integrity. Sources describe a tense negotiation over procedural compliance, with Harry maintaining a composed demeanor while his advisors argued for the protection of his rights under both U.S. and British law. The formal charges filed against Harry are said to include forgery, falsification of official records, and conspiracy to mislead governmental authorities. While the legal definitions vary slightly between jurisdictions, all encompass the deliberate misrepresentation of information with the intent to create legal documents that carry official weight. Authorities reportedly view the alleged falsifications as systematic rather than accidental, noting patterns in submission dates, notarization irregularities, and deviations from established registry protocols. Prosecutors have argued that these actions were not isolated mistakes, but coordinated efforts to manipulate documentation for personal gain, raising significant concerns regarding legal accountability at the highest social echelons. The arrest itself was reportedly conducted with extreme discretion, though the news quickly leaked to international media outlets. In accordance with legal protocol, Harry was taken into custody at a designated law enforcement facility, where he was processed in a controlled environment to prevent public spectacle. During processing, officials are said to have meticulously documented the chain of custody for all evidence, ensuring that the integrity of the investigation would not be compromised by media interference or unauthorized access. Legal observers have noted that such careful documentation is particularly critical in cases involving individuals with high public profiles, where any procedural misstep could be leveraged in court or public discourse. While Harry's legal team emphasized cooperation with authorities, the arrest nonetheless triggered a wave of speculation regarding potential preemptive measures to protect the Duke's public image. Public relations experts were reportedly consulted immediately to manage communications, although the balance between transparency and discretion proved delicate. Any attempt to influence public perception risked criticism for attempting to sway opinion while legal proceedings were ongoing, yet failing to provide information invited a media vacuum filled with conjecture and sensationalism. Sources indicate that a combination of carefully worded statements and strategic media briefings was employed to mitigate reputational damage while respecting the legal process. Within the royal household, the response was swift and multifaceted. King Charles, along with senior advisors, reportedly convened emergency meetings to determine the implications for the monarchy and to establish a coordinated strategy. Prince William, traditionally protective of royal protocol, is said to have insisted that the family must visibly distance itself from the Duke of Sussex to preserve public trust. Discussions reportedly included whether to suspend Harry's titles temporarily, remove him from formal duties, or issue a public statement clarifying the family's position regarding the legal proceedings. Palace insiders suggest that the arrest triggered profound anxiety about how the public and media would perceive the monarchy's response, balancing familial loyalty with institutional responsibility. As news of the arrest spread, social media platforms exploded with commentary. Public reactions ranged from shock to outrage, with many questioning the ethical implications of falsifying birth records, particularly when involving children. Supporters of Harry argued that he should be presumed innocent until proven guilty, emphasizing that complex legal situations can be misrepresented in initial reports. Critics, however, interpreted the allegations as evidence of recklessness and deception, framing the arrest as confirmation of long-standing suspicions about the Duke's judgment. International media outlets quickly picked up the story, framing it as one of the most significant legal scandals involving a royal in decades, with continuous coverage exploring both procedural details and broader implications. Legal experts have highlighted several unprecedented aspects of the case. First, cross-jurisdictional cooperation between American and British authorities is relatively rare in matters involving personal documents, particularly for individuals with royal status. Second, the potential penalties, if Harry is convicted, include fines, probation, and even imprisonment, reflecting the seriousness with which legal systems treat tampering with official records. Third, the case raises broader questions about legal accountability for high-profile individuals, setting a potential precedent for how privilege interacts with responsibility. Commentators note that this scenario places the monarchy at a unique intersection of law, tradition, and public scrutiny, challenging long-held assumptions about immunity from procedural consequences. During the initial detention, law enforcement reportedly conducted a thorough review of Harry's digital and physical records related to the birth documents. This review included examining emails, official submissions, notarizations, and communications with registry offices. Forensic investigators are said to have meticulously reconstructed the timeline of submissions, identifying potential points where discrepancies were introduced or corrected. Legal analysts suggest that such a comprehensive approach is necessary not only to establish the scope of the alleged forgery, but also to differentiate between intentional misrepresentation and procedural error, a distinction that will likely be central in any trial proceedings. At the same time, royal communications were reportedly managed with extreme care. Advisors were said to have crafted official statements emphasizing the distinction between Harry's personal legal situation and the institution of the monarchy. These statements underscored that while the investigation and arrest were matters of public record, the royal family remained committed to principles of legality, transparency, and accountability. Observers note that such careful phrasing serves to maintain institutional credibility while limiting direct criticism of Harry, reflecting the delicate balance between public perception and private family dynamics. The arrest also triggered immediate questions about the implications for Archie and Lilibet. While the children are not themselves subject to legal proceedings, their official status, including titles, privileges, and ceremonial roles, is indirectly affected by the alleged document discrepancies. Experts in royal law have noted that if the birth documents are deemed invalid or falsified, official recognition of the children could be temporarily suspended, with long-term consequences for their position within the line of succession. Though such outcomes remain speculative, the potential impact on both public perception and family dynamics is substantial. Legal commentators have emphasized the importance of due process in this case. While the arrest is a dramatic and newsworthy event, charges remain allegations until proven in court. Defense attorneys are reportedly preparing arguments centered on procedural nuances, intent, and the distinction between administrative error and deliberate falsification. Such defenses may involve expert testimony, document analysis, and contextual arguments regarding the complexity of international documentation and the involvement of multiple administrative offices. Analysts caution that the eventual outcome will depend heavily on the ability of prosecutors to establish clear evidence of intent and direct involvement, as opposed to circumstantial indications. In addition to the immediate legal consequences, the arrest has prompted broader discussions about accountability, privilege, and the public's perception of the monarchy. Media coverage has often framed the situation as a test of whether the royal family can uphold legal and ethical standards when dealing with one of its most famous members. Commentators have highlighted that public trust in institutions, especially monarchy, is fragile and can be significantly influenced by perceptions of fairness, transparency, and responsibility. The arrest of Prince Harry thus serves not only as a legal event, but also as a pivotal moment in shaping the narrative of modern royalty. As proceedings continue, the potential for further revelations remains high. Investigators are reportedly examining additional documents and communications that may shed light on the extent of the alleged forgery. Legal advisors are monitoring every development closely, recognizing that new findings could affect both the scope of charges and the strategy for defense. Meanwhile, public attention remains intense, with audiences around the world following developments in real time, interpreting each statement, leak, and procedural update through a lens of fascination, scrutiny, and speculation. In conclusion, the arrest of Prince Harry represents a historic moment that intersects legal accountability, royal protocol, and global media attention. It is a culmination of months of investigation into the alleged falsification of birth documents for Archie and Lilibet, resulting in charges that challenge both personal responsibility and institutional integrity. The immediate legal proceedings, combined with the unprecedented media scrutiny and internal royal deliberations, underscore the high stakes involved. From procedural compliance to public perception, every facet of the situation carries weight, shaping not only the Duke's future, but also the broader narrative of monarchy in the 21st century. The news of Prince Harry's arrest reverberated throughout the royal household with unprecedented intensity. For decades, the family had weathered scandals, controversies, and public scrutiny, but few events had ever prompted a response as immediate, coordinated, and emotionally charged as this one. Senior members of the family convened in the private quarters of the palace, a meeting shrouded in secrecy, but reportedly involving the king, Queen Consort Camilla, Prince William, Princess Anne, and a small group of trusted advisors. The urgency of the situation was palpable. The arrest of a royal family member for allegedly falsifying official birth documents was not only a legal crisis, but a reputational emergency that threatened the integrity of the monarchy itself. King Charles, often viewed as the pragmatic steward of the modern monarchy, is said to have taken the lead during these emergency deliberations. Sources close to the palace describe him as visibly distressed yet resolute, understanding that any hesitation or misstep could be interpreted as leniency or favoritism. The central question dominating the discussions was how to balance familial loyalty with institutional responsibility. While personal affection for his son remained, Charles reportedly recognized that the monarchy's long-term survival depended on a clear, unambiguous response that reaffirmed the rule of law and the principles of accountability. Prince William's reaction, by contrast, was reportedly much more immediate and severe. Insiders suggest that William viewed Harry's alleged actions not only as a legal violation, but as a betrayal of trust, both within the family and toward the institution they represent. Throughout the deliberations, William is said to have consistently advocated for a firm stance, public disavowal, suspension of titles, and permanent removal from official royal duties. He argued that any sign of leniency would undermine the monarchy's credibility, particularly given the global media scrutiny already surrounding the arrest. In private conversations, William reportedly expressed frustration at repeated instances where Harry had acted independently, often ignoring counsel and established protocol, and viewed the current situation as a culmination of those patterns. Princess Anne, widely regarded as the most principled and protocol-focused member of the royal family, reportedly echoed the sentiment that accountability must be absolute. Sources indicate that she emphasized the importance of sending a message not only to the public, but also to other members of the family, that no individual, regardless of status or popularity, could operate above the law. Anne's perspective was particularly influential in framing the discussion around the broader institutional implications, highlighting that the monarchy's legitimacy relies on consistency, fairness, and public trust. Camilla, Queen Consort, while less publicly vocal in media circles, is said to have been deeply involved in the discussions, providing counsel on both public messaging and internal family dynamics. She reportedly stressed the importance of carefully managing the optics of any decision, cautioning against actions that might be interpreted as excessively punitive or vindictive. Her guidance reportedly focused on ensuring that the family's official statements emphasized principles rather than personal grievances, framing any measures as necessary for the preservation of the monarchy's integrity rather than as retribution against Harry. Central to the deliberations was the question of Harry's titles and privileges. As Duke of Sussex, he enjoyed a range of ceremonial, financial, and social privileges that had long been integral to his public role. However, insiders report that the palace quickly concluded that continuing to associate Harry with these honors in the wake of legal allegations would be untenable. The risk of public perception equating the monarchy's tacit approval with complicity was deemed too high. Advisors reportedly drafted multiple scenarios, including temporary suspension, permanent revocation, or complete disavowal, weighing the potential legal, symbolic, and reputational consequences of each. Ultimately, the consensus leaned toward permanent revocation, signaling that the royal family would sever official ties and remove any formal recognition of his status. The decision to disown Harry was not made lightly. Confidential sources describe an emotionally fraught process, in which members of the family balanced personal attachment with institutional imperatives. The move was unprecedented in recent history, reflecting the unique gravity of the situation. The alleged falsification of birth documents for Archie and Lilibet, the arrest by legal authorities, and the subsequent public scrutiny created a scenario in which inaction was deemed far more damaging than a decisive response. Family advisors reportedly emphasized that any delay in issuing a public stance would allow speculation, rumor, and negative narratives to dominate media coverage, further eroding trust in the monarchy. Once the decision was made, the communication strategy became paramount. Palace officials reportedly coordinated closely with legal and public relations teams to craft a statement that would be both firm and measured. The statement emphasized the royal family's unwavering commitment to legality, transparency, and accountability while avoiding personal attacks on Harry. It declared that, in light of the serious legal allegations and ongoing investigation, Prince Harry would no longer be recognized as an active member of the royal family, his titles suspended, and his participation in official duties permanently curtailed. The phrasing carefully avoided inflammatory language while making the consequences clear, reflecting a dual aim: protecting the monarchy's reputation and signaling that no one is above the law. Public reaction to the announcement was immediate and intense. International media outlets covered the story extensively, highlighting both the legal allegations and the unprecedented royal response. Analysts suggested that the decision to disown Harry sent a clear message about the monarchy's prioritization of institutional integrity over familial bonds. Social media platforms were flooded with debate, with some commentators praising the royal family for upholding accountability and others questioning whether the decision was excessively harsh or emotionally detached. Within these discussions, the global audience was deeply divided, reflecting the complexity of the situation. A beloved royal figure facing legal jeopardy, a family balancing loyalty with responsibility, and children indirectly affected by adult decisions. Inside the palace, the impact of the decision was reportedly deeply felt. Senior advisors noted that while Charles and William felt the measure was necessary, it also carried emotional consequences that would resonate for years. Private discussions reportedly included reflections on the strain between family loyalty and institutional duty, acknowledging that public leadership often requires actions that are personally painful. Sources indicate that some family members experienced a sense of grief and loss, recognizing that disowning a son, brother, and father, regardless of legal circumstances, was an extraordinary and emotionally complex decision. The ramifications extended beyond immediate family dynamics to include the broader royal network. Advisors reportedly consulted with representatives from affiliated charities, ceremonial offices, and international diplomatic contacts to inform them of the decision and its implications. The move to publicly disown Harry necessitated revisions to protocols, formal communications, and ceremonial procedures, including how official events would address the Duke's absence and the status of his children. Experts in royal law and protocol have noted that such adjustments are rare and complex, involving both legal considerations and traditional expectations that date back centuries. Archie and Lilibet's status became a particularly sensitive issue during these discussions. While the children were not legally implicated in any wrongdoing, the alleged tampering with their birth records created uncertainty regarding official recognition. Legal advisors reportedly emphasized that any formal acknowledgement of titles, privileges, or succession rights could be perceived as validating or condoning the alleged actions, thereby undermining the monarchy's credibility. The palace reportedly explored several options, ultimately deciding to temporarily suspend any official acknowledgement until the matter was resolved legally. This decision reflects an extraordinary precaution, balancing the welfare of the children with the imperative to maintain public trust in the institution. The decision to disown Harry also had symbolic significance. Royal historians and analysts have suggested that the move marks a historic moment in the relationship between monarchy and accountability, signaling that the rules governing the institution apply equally to all members, regardless of fame, popularity, or media presence. Observers noted that while royal scandals are not uncommon, few involve legal allegations that necessitate permanent public disavowal. The combination of legal severity, public scrutiny, and familial intervention creates a precedent that could influence future interactions between the monarchy and its most high-profile members. While the royal family's official stance was firm, private communications reportedly continued with a mixture of caution and care. Advisors emphasized the importance of maintaining lines of communication to monitor legal developments, protect the welfare of affected children, and anticipate potential media fallout. Internal discussions reportedly included contingency planning for additional revelations, potential public statements from Harry or his legal team, and strategies for managing international perceptions of the monarchy's handling of the crisis. These measures underscore the multidimensional nature of the response. Legal, emotional, ceremonial, and reputational factors all intersected, creating a complex matrix of decision-making. In the days following the announcement, the palace reportedly implemented protocols to reinforce the separation between Harry and official royal duties. Public appearances previously scheduled for the Duke were cancelled or reassigned, ceremonial invitations were revoked, and official channels were instructed to avoid referencing Harry in any capacity. The swift and comprehensive nature of these measures demonstrates the monarchy's intent to communicate decisively to the public. The alleged misconduct is taken seriously, and institutional consequences are immediate and lasting. Experts note that such a response reflects both legal prudence and an acute awareness of the power of symbolism in public perception. The decision also prompted reflection on the long-term implications for the monarchy. Advisors reportedly discussed potential scenarios ranging from acquittal to conviction, considering how each outcome could affect public trust, internal cohesion, and media narratives. The strategic emphasis was on maintaining credibility regardless of the legal outcome, signaling that the family would uphold principles rather than adjusting their stance in response to legal developments or media pressure. This approach reflects an institutional commitment to stability, continuity, and rule-based governance, even in circumstances where personal relationships and emotions are deeply entangled. The investigation into the alleged forgery of Archie and Lilibet's birth documents began quietly, almost imperceptibly, but it quickly escalated into one of the most high-profile legal inquiries in recent royal history. Authorities had initially received a tip from a whistleblower with intimate knowledge of the Sussex household's administrative dealings. According to sources, the whistleblower was motivated by a mixture of ethical concern and frustration over repeated irregularities in the handling of the children's official records. The tip outlined anomalies in the birth certificates, notarized statements, and registration documents for both Archie and Lilibet, suggesting potential tampering or falsification intended to misrepresent details of parentage and residency. The seriousness of the allegation prompted immediate attention from both British and international legal authorities. Because Archie and Lilibet's births were registered in multiple jurisdictions, reflecting the Sussexes' transatlantic lifestyle, investigators faced the complex task of coordinating across different legal systems, including UK civil registry offices, American consular documentation authorities, and private legal representatives. This multi-jurisdictional investigation required unprecedented levels of confidentiality, precision, and legal rigor, given the sensitivity of the subjects involved and the potential ramifications for the royal family's global image. Investigators began by obtaining certified copies of all relevant documents, including hospital records, official birth certificates, and supporting affidavits. A team of forensic document examiners was brought in to scrutinize the paperwork for inconsistencies, alterations, and signs of falsification. Experts reportedly noted discrepancies in ink types, signature styles, and notarization dates, raising immediate red flags about the authenticity of certain entries. While each anomaly alone could have been attributed to clerical error, the pattern across multiple documents suggested deliberate manipulation. Legal analysts later described the findings as highly irregular and sufficient to warrant a full criminal investigation into potential forgery and fraud. Simultaneously, investigators interviewed staff members, administrators, and others with direct knowledge of the Sussexes' handling of official documents. Some former staff reportedly disclosed that Harry had maintained tight control over the paperwork, often instructing aides to handle sensitive documents privately and outside normal administrative channels. While these claims were difficult to verify independently, they contributed to a broader narrative that procedural irregularities were not accidental but potentially intentional. Investigators were particularly interested in understanding who had access to the documents, what instructions were given regarding notarization and submission, and whether any deliberate concealment had taken place. The inquiry also examined communications between Harry and Meghan Markle, both internal and external, regarding the registration and verification of Archie and Lilibet's births. Investigators obtained digital records, including emails, text messages, and secure messaging applications, looking for any evidence that instructions had been issued to alter, fabricate, or obscure official details. Sources suggest that multiple messages contained ambiguous language about ensuring privacy or protecting family identity, which authorities interpreted as potentially indicative of intent to mislead or manipulate official records. While such phrasing could be benign in ordinary circumstances, the context of repeated anomalies across multiple documents elevated concern among legal teams. As evidence accumulated, legal counsel specializing in international family law was consulted to determine the scope of potential violations. Forgery of official birth records is a criminal offense with severe penalties, including imprisonment, fines, and lasting reputational damage. When applied to members of the royal family, the stakes were exponentially higher. The allegations were not only legal, but carried enormous public and media implications, threatening to destabilize public confidence in the monarchy. Legal experts reportedly emphasized the need for a meticulous and airtight investigation, given the likelihood that any perceived procedural misstep would be heavily scrutinized by international media outlets. After months of careful preparation, the authorities reached the point where they could move from investigation to formal action. Arrest warrants were drafted in coordination with law enforcement agencies, ensuring that every legal requirement was met. The warrants specified allegations of document forgery, misrepresentation, and intentional obstruction of official registration processes. Sources close to the investigation indicate that officials took extraordinary precautions to avoid leaks, arranging the operation discreetly to minimize public spectacle while maintaining the integrity of the legal process. On the day of the arrest, police officers arrived at the Sussex residence under strict operational protocols. The operation was reportedly conducted with maximum respect for privacy, though the unprecedented nature of arresting a senior royal made complete discretion nearly impossible. Media outlets immediately began reporting on the situation, with footage capturing discreet police vehicles outside the property and official statements confirming that a high-profile individual had been taken into custody in connection with a document forgery investigation. The announcement sent shockwaves through royal circles, media organizations, and public audiences worldwide, marking a historic moment. For the first time in living memory, a senior royal faced legal detention over allegations tied directly to official documentation and potential fraud. Prince Harry's response to the arrest was reportedly a mixture of disbelief, anger, and panic. Sources indicate that legal representatives advised him on his rights, the nature of the charges, and the potential ramifications of public statements. Despite his high-profile status, Harry was required to undergo the same procedural steps as any citizen accused of similar offenses, including identification verification, fingerprinting, and formal questioning. The experience, according to insiders, was deeply humiliating and emotionally taxing, particularly given the intense media scrutiny that had already been escalating for months. The public fallout was immediate and intense. Media organizations around the world covered the arrest extensively, analyzing every angle of the allegations and speculating on potential outcomes. Commentary ranged from legal experts explaining the mechanics of document forgery and associated penalties, to royal correspondents highlighting the unprecedented nature of the situation within the context of modern monarchy. Social media platforms erupted with debate, with discussions focusing not only on the legal aspects, but also on the ethical and emotional dimensions. Questions about Harry's responsibility, the potential impact on Archie and Lilibet, and the broader implications for the royal family dominated conversations. Legal analysts were quick to underscore that an arrest does not constitute a conviction, emphasizing the presumption of innocence. However, the mere fact of detention and formal investigation carries significant reputational consequences, particularly for a member of the royal family. Authorities faced the dual challenge of conducting a thorough investigation while navigating the global attention that accompanied the case. Procedural transparency, chain of custody integrity, and careful documentation became paramount, with legal teams meticulously recording each step of the process to prevent later disputes or claims of procedural impropriety. The arrest also triggered an intense internal review within the royal household. Advisors and legal representatives worked closely to assess the immediate implications for public duties, ceremonial roles, and ongoing engagements associated with Prince Harry. Officials reportedly moved swiftly to cancel or reassign appearances, suspend patronages, and ensure that any official documentation or public representation of Harry was immediately updated to reflect his changed status. This rapid internal recalibration underscores the high stakes involved. The monarchy needed to signal accountability and maintain operational continuity, even amidst a historic and emotionally fraught legal crisis. Beyond immediate logistics, the arrest prompted serious reflection on the wider systemic implications. Royal legal advisors reportedly began reviewing internal processes for document verification, staff oversight, and secure record-keeping. The alleged forgery exposed vulnerabilities in the handling of sensitive documents, prompting discussions about how future incidents could be prevented. Recommendations included stricter access protocols, enhanced digital record-keeping, independent audits of critical records, and clear escalation procedures for potential discrepancies. The palace reportedly framed these measures not only as risk management, but as part of a broader commitment to transparency and institutional resilience. As the investigation progressed, additional witnesses and experts were called upon to provide testimony. Forensic document examiners, registry officials, and administrative staff were interviewed to clarify the origins, handling, and authenticity of each document. In some cases, discrepancies were resolved through objective analysis, while others reinforced concerns about deliberate manipulation. Legal teams worked diligently to establish patterns, contextualize anomalies, and substantiate allegations beyond mere speculation. The evidentiary process was both exhaustive and meticulous, reflecting the extraordinary care required when a royal figure faces potential criminal charges. While the legal process unfolded, the human element of the arrest remained prominent. Sources close to Harry described the emotional toll on him and Meghan Markle, who reportedly struggled with the dual pressures of public scrutiny and legal jeopardy. The couple's children, though not legally implicated, became a focal point of concern, with advisors emphasizing the need to protect them from media exposure and ensure continuity in care and education. Observers noted that the combination of legal, emotional, and reputational pressures created a uniquely intense environment, unlike typical high-profile criminal investigations. By the conclusion of the initial legal procedures, authorities had gathered sufficient evidence to proceed with formal charges. The arrest was followed by court filings outlining the allegations, specifying the alleged forgery, and establishing a timeline of events that implicated Harry in both the creation and concealment of falsified records. Legal analysts emphasized that the next stages, including hearings, potential plea discussions, and eventual trial proceedings, would be complex and closely watched. Every procedural step would be subject to intense media scrutiny, and the implications for the monarchy, public perception, and Harry's personal future would continue to unfold over months or even years. Throughout this period, the global media landscape remained captivated. International news outlets dedicated significant coverage to each development, providing analysis of legal strategies, historical comparisons, and potential outcomes. Social media amplified public engagement, with debates spanning legal interpretation, moral responsibility, and the broader impact on the monarchy. Royal commentators highlighted the unprecedented nature of the case, noting that while scandals and controversies have long been associated with the royal family, the combination of criminal allegations, a formal arrest, and public disownment represented a convergence of circumstances never before experienced in modern royal history. The courtroom proceedings began amid unprecedented media scrutiny and a palpable sense of tension. The allegations against Prince Harry had already shaken the royal family and the public imagination, and now they were to be played out in full view of a legal system that rarely, if ever, sees members of the monarchy in the defendant's seat. From the outset, security measures were extraordinarily tight. Entry to the court was strictly controlled, with layers of police presence, private security, and restricted media access ensuring that the proceedings would not descend into chaos. The charges were serious: document forgery, misrepresentation of official records, and potential obstruction of governmental procedures. Legal analysts quickly noted that if convicted, Harry could face significant penalties, including imprisonment, fines, and long-term damage to his reputation and standing within the royal family. The case also posed constitutional questions, as the royal family's traditional legal immunities were not absolute when it came to criminal matters in modern Britain. Experts debated whether the case would set a precedent for future accountability of senior royals, highlighting the extraordinary historical significance of the trial. Prince Harry arrived at the court looking tense but composed, flanked by a small team of legal advisors. Observers noted his guarded demeanor, a mix of defiance and anxiety, as cameras clicked and reporters strained to capture every movement. Inside the courtroom, he was advised to remain silent except when directly addressing the judge or responding to counsel. Despite the intense atmosphere, Harry maintained a disciplined focus, aware that any misstep could be magnified into a global news story within minutes. The prosecution presented its case with meticulous detail, walking the court through the timeline of alleged events surrounding the birth documentation of Archie and Lilibet. Forensic experts were called to testify on anomalies found in the documents, including irregularities in notarization, discrepancies in signature patterns, and inconsistencies between digital and printed records. Each point was accompanied by physical evidence, high-resolution images, and expert analysis demonstrating the alleged manipulations. Witnesses were carefully examined, including former staff who recounted instructions they had received regarding the handling of official paperwork. Many described situations in which they felt pressured to act outside standard procedures, and some claimed that Harry personally oversaw steps that later appeared irregular. One of the most dramatic moments in the early proceedings involved a forensic document examiner demonstrating on screen how certain entries in Archie's birth certificate appeared to have been altered after initial filing. The room was silent as the expert explained the techniques used to detect such manipulations, including analysis of ink composition, pressure patterns from signatures, and digital metadata. The prosecution emphasized that these discrepancies could not plausibly be attributed to clerical error alone, suggesting intentional effort to misrepresent facts. The visual presentation and clear articulation of technical evidence had a striking impact on observers, many of whom followed the live broadcasts with a mix of fascination and shock. The defense countered with a strategy emphasizing procedural ambiguity and lack of intent. Harry's lawyers argued that any anomalies were the result of administrative errors, inconsistent international procedures, and the challenges of managing multiple legal jurisdictions. They highlighted Harry's lack of prior criminal history, his cooperation with investigators, and the complex circumstances surrounding the registration of his children's births. Witnesses for the defense included administrative experts familiar with transatlantic documentation processes, who testified that minor discrepancies were not unusual and could arise even in fully compliant procedures. Despite the defense's framing, the prosecution repeatedly returned to the question of intent, arguing that the patterns of irregularities suggested more than mere oversight. They pointed to emails and messages recovered from secure channels, interpreting language that referenced privacy protection and identity security as deliberate instructions to manipulate official documents. Legal commentators debated the interpretation of these communications, noting that while the language was ambiguous, the repeated and consistent deviations from standard procedures strengthened the prosecution's case. Throughout the trial, media coverage intensified, with global networks reporting minute-by-minute updates. Royal correspondents analyzed every statement, gesture, and expression, often interpreting subtle changes in demeanor as signs of guilt or anxiety. Social media exploded with speculation, memes, and heated debates, with public opinion divided sharply between supporters of Harry's claims of procedural mishandling and critics who viewed the evidence as overwhelming. This intense attention placed additional pressure on both the legal teams and the royal family, as every court filing, transcript excerpt, and public statement was scrutinized for implications about the monarchy and the individuals involved. In one particularly tense session, the court examined Lilibet's birth documents. The forensic analysis revealed discrepancies similar to those found in Archie's records. The prosecution argued that the similarities indicated a repeated pattern of deliberate misrepresentation, reinforcing the narrative of intentional manipulation. Defense attorneys attempted to contextualize these findings within the challenges of coordinating international documentation, citing differing standards between UK and US authorities and emphasizing the logistical complexities involved in filing dual records. The judge, however, reminded the court that legal compliance is required regardless of complexity, underscoring the seriousness of the allegations. Outside the courtroom, the royal household reacted swiftly. Advisors and communications teams prepared statements emphasizing the presumption of innocence, while also expressing concern for the integrity of institutional processes. Prince William and King Charles reportedly held urgent consultations to assess potential public relations strategies, anticipate legal outcomes, and manage the broader implications for the monarchy. Buckingham Palace faced a delicate balancing act, defending the institution's credibility while respecting the legal process and the personal circumstances of a senior family member facing serious criminal allegations. The trial also prompted intense international interest. Media outlets across Europe, North America, and Asia covered proceedings in real time, analyzing the evidence and speculating about potential outcomes. Royal historians highlighted the historical significance of a senior royal being formally charged and detained, noting parallels to past controversies, but emphasizing that no previous case had involved allegations of document forgery directly tied to the lineage of heirs. Analysts discussed the unprecedented nature of the case, noting that the intersection of criminal law, royal protocol, and global media attention created a uniquely complex and high-stakes scenario. Amid the legal wrangling, human stories emerged. Courtroom observers described Harry's interactions with his legal team, noting moments of visible distress, moments of calm strategizing, and interactions with his advisors that highlighted both vulnerability and determination. Reports suggested that Meghan Markle was following proceedings closely from a private location, receiving updates from her own legal counsel, and preparing for potential public statements. The couple's children remained shielded from direct exposure, but concerns about emotional impact and media attention were a constant undercurrent throughout the trial. The courtroom drama escalated during cross-examinations, when prosecution attorneys challenged the defense on inconsistencies in Harry's own statements. Previous interviews, public addresses, and private communications were referenced, highlighting contradictions and perceived evasions. Legal experts noted that while inconsistencies do not prove guilt, they can undermine credibility and influence judicial perception, particularly when combined with physical evidence of document anomalies. Observers commented on Harry's measured responses, noting that while he maintained composure, moments of hesitation and visible tension suggested the psychological weight of the proceedings. As the trial progressed, expert witnesses continued to dissect every element of the alleged forgeries. Forensic specialists explained methods of detecting tampering, statisticians provided probability analyses of patterns in the records, and legal scholars offered context regarding penalties and historical precedents. Each session built a cumulative narrative for the court, whether by design or oversight. The inconsistencies were significant, repeated, and consequential. The defense, while articulating arguments of procedural confusion and bureaucratic error, faced a growing challenge in countering the mounting evidence that suggested deliberate action. The trial also brought unprecedented ethical questions to the forefront. Legal commentators debated the responsibilities of royal figures in ensuring compliance with legal procedures, especially when children's official documentation is involved. Discussions of privacy, parental discretion, and institutional oversight were juxtaposed against principles of transparency, accountability, and legal obligation. Public discourse reflected these tensions, with debates over whether traditional privileges should shield royals from scrutiny or whether modern expectations of equality under the law should prevail. Media coverage, meanwhile, shaped public perception. Headlines emphasized both the gravity of the allegations and the sensational aspects of the trial. A prince facing criminal charges, allegations of document forgery tied to his own children, and the potential implications for the royal lineage. Social media amplified these narratives, often mixing factual reporting with speculation and emotional commentary. Analysts noted that the intensity of coverage created a feedback loop. Public attention influenced legal strategy, which in turn became the subject of further media scrutiny. Within the legal proceedings, the question of motive became central. The prosecution argued that the alleged forgeries served to protect the couple's personal privacy and secure status for their children, but did so by circumventing legal processes. The defense countered, emphasizing the pressures of high-profile life, the need to protect family privacy, and the logistical complexities of managing dual legal systems. The judge, while impartial, repeatedly stressed that motive alone does not negate legal responsibility, emphasizing the requirement for objective assessment of evidence and adherence to statutory standards. By mid-trial, the courtroom had become a stage for a complex interplay of law, family dynamics, media attention, and historical significance. Every witness, document, and argument contributed to a multifaceted narrative that extended far beyond the immediate allegations. Analysts highlighted the unprecedented convergence of criminal law and monarchy, noting that the case could redefine expectations for accountability, transparency, and procedural rigor for senior royals in the modern era. Amid this intense scrutiny, Harry's legal team continued to refine its strategy, seeking to humanize their client, contextualize alleged discrepancies, and emphasize cooperation with authorities. The defense emphasized the emotional strain of public life, the responsibility of protecting children from undue exposure, and the genuine complexities of international documentation. While acknowledging procedural irregularities, they sought to frame these not as criminal. As the trial progressed into its second week, the emotional toll on Prince Harry became increasingly apparent. Observers reported subtle but telling signs of stress, lines etched deeper into his forehead, occasional moments of visible frustration, and a guarded stiffness in his posture. Each day brought new rounds of questioning, evidence presentation, and media scrutiny, all of which compounded the pressure. Legal teams met in private chambers for hours on end, analyzing witness testimony, strategizing cross-examinations, and preparing for the inevitable twists that were already making headlines around the world. Meghan Markle, though not physically present in the courtroom, experienced her own private ordeal. From a secure location, she monitored every development, guided by her legal advisors and palace communications team. Sources close to her reported long periods of silence punctuated by bursts of anger and distress, as the media narratives began to swirl around her alleged role in the documentation controversy. Friends described her as increasingly anxious, particularly when journalists speculated about her motivations and painted her as a manipulative figure orchestrating events from behind the scenes. This intense scrutiny fed into a growing sense of isolation, despite support from her immediate circle and a few close allies in Hollywood and Britain. Inside the royal family, tensions reached unprecedented levels. King Charles, already burdened with public responsibilities and complex diplomatic obligations, found himself drawn into the legal drama. Advisors reported that Charles spent countless hours reviewing legal documents, assessing potential fallout, and coordinating responses to public statements and media inquiries. Prince William, often described as stoic and calculated, became a visible presence in communications briefings, emphasizing the family's commitment to institutional integrity while carefully navigating the line between support for his brother and safeguarding the monarchy's credibility. Observers noted that the dynamics between the brothers were fragile, strained by years of unresolved grievances, now magnified by the legal and media spotlight. The public reaction was equally intense. Social media platforms exploded with discussions, memes, and conspiracy theories. Analysts observed that the trial had effectively become a global spectacle, with audiences tracking minute details of testimony, court appearances, and media commentary. Opinions were sharply divided. Some sympathized with Harry and Meghan, framing them as victims of a relentless media machine and an outdated royal system, while others interpreted the evidence as damning, questioning their judgment, integrity, and sense of responsibility. Public sentiment surveys conducted during the trial indicated fluctuating approval ratings for the royal family, with younger demographics showing more skepticism and older audiences leaning toward traditional interpretations of duty and accountability. Courtroom proceedings also revealed deeply personal aspects of the case. Witnesses testified about the intense pressure Harry reportedly placed on staff to manage privacy and documentation for his children. Former aides described moments of fear and ethical conflict, recounting instructions that seemed unusual, sometimes bordering on illegal. These testimonies painted a picture of a young father caught between the responsibilities of royal status, parental concern, and the public's gaze. At times, the courtroom seemed to oscillate between a legal tribunal and a theater of human emotion, with observers and participants alike acutely aware of the high stakes involved. During cross-examinations, the prosecution pressed relentlessly on discrepancies in communication records. Emails, text messages, and secure app conversations were presented as evidence, suggesting coordination that appeared inconsistent with standard legal processes. Some messages contained ambiguous phrasing, which the prosecution interpreted as deliberate instructions to manipulate official documents. The defense countered that the language was colloquial, not legally precise, and emphasized that the intent to commit a crime could not be conclusively established from casual messages. The judge repeatedly reminded the court to distinguish between interpretation and proof, emphasizing that conclusions must be based on solid evidence rather than conjecture. The psychological dimension of the trial became increasingly visible. Observers noted that Harry appeared to oscillate between moments of calm reasoning and visible tension, particularly when questioned about his personal involvement in sensitive procedural steps. Legal psychologists consulted by media outlets speculated on the stress of public trials, noting that even seasoned professionals could struggle under constant scrutiny and that emotional reactions were normal. Meghan, meanwhile, was reportedly dealing with compounded stress related to her public image, legal strategy, and the welfare of her children, all of which created a high-pressure environment for both parents. As testimony unfolded, the courtroom drama began to highlight broader questions about the royal family's adaptation to modern legal frameworks. Legal scholars noted that the case tested the limits of traditional royal privileges, questioning whether senior family members could claim immunity in matters that intersected with criminal statutes. The trial also underscored the tension between privacy rights for children of high-profile individuals and the public's right to transparency in matters affecting official documentation and succession. These discussions resonated beyond the courtroom, becoming topics of debate in academic articles, opinion pieces, and media commentary. One particularly notable moment occurred when a former palace administrator described attempts to balance confidentiality with legal compliance. The witness recounted instructions from Harry that, while framed as protective measures, appeared inconsistent with standard procedures. This testimony prompted a wave of media analysis, with commentators dissecting the ethical and legal implications. Legal experts debated whether the alleged instructions could be considered coercive or whether they reflected reasonable attempts to manage highly sensitive information. The ambiguity created fertile ground for public speculation, further intensifying the media storm surrounding the trial. Meanwhile, Meghan's team worked diligently to prepare her statements and potential courtroom appearances, anticipating that the prosecution might attempt to link her to alleged irregularities. Strategists emphasized controlling narrative framing, presenting Meghan as a devoted mother navigating extraordinary circumstances rather than as a manipulator of legal processes. Public relations specialists highlighted her charitable work, public advocacy, and contributions to cultural projects, attempting to counterbalance negative portrayals with narratives emphasizing empathy, commitment, and professionalism. These efforts were complicated by the 24-hour news cycle and the constant churn of social media commentary, which amplified every detail into a global story. The emotional stakes were further heightened by media speculation about the children's involvement. While Archie and Lilibet were shielded from direct exposure, commentators and journalists frequently referenced the potential impact of the trial on their future, both legally and socially. This speculation created a layer of moral tension. The court had to weigh evidence and procedural fairness while ensuring that children's welfare remained a priority. Observers noted that this balancing act added to the courtroom pressure, as every decision, every statement, and every piece of evidence carried implications far beyond the immediate legal context. During the second week, the courtroom also witnessed confrontations between legal counsel. The prosecution aggressively questioned the defense on inconsistencies in statements made by Harry and Meghan in prior interviews, speeches, and public communications. Lawyers pointed out contradictions, highlighting situations where narratives had shifted depending on audience or context. The defense responded with clarifications, contextual explanations, and arguments about selective reporting or misinterpretation by media outlets. These exchanges were closely analyzed by journalists, legal commentators, and royal historians, who debated the impact of such contradictions on credibility, intent, and the overall strength of the case. Outside the courtroom, the palace faced significant logistical and public relations challenges. Advisors coordinated messages to reinforce the monarchy's integrity, manage international media inquiries, and navigate diplomatic implications. Royal spokespeople emphasized the family's commitment to justice while avoiding statements that could be interpreted as prejudgment. Internal communications highlighted the importance of maintaining cohesion among family members, balancing support for Harry and Meghan with broader institutional priorities. These behind-the-scenes efforts reflected a complex interplay of legal, emotional, and political considerations, underscoring the unprecedented nature of the trial. Public perception continued to evolve with each new revelation. Social media platforms became battlegrounds of opinion, with users sharing evidence snippets, personal interpretations, and emotional reactions. Some portrayed Harry and Meghan as victims of institutional rigidity and media intrusion, while others painted them as reckless actors whose actions undermined legal norms. Polling data indicated fluctuating public sentiment, with temporary spikes in sympathy often corresponding to moments of visible emotional strain by the couple, and declines following particularly compelling prosecution arguments or evidence presentations. The trial also had broader implications for the monarchy itself. Historians and legal analysts noted that the proceedings might reshape expectations for transparency, accountability, and legal compliance among senior royals. Debates emerged about the role of modern media in influencing public perception, the ethical responsibilities of parents with high-profile children, and the evolving balance between private family matters and public legal obligations. Scholars emphasize that regardless of the trial's outcome, its impact on the perception of the royal family and the institution's adaptation to contemporary legal and social expectations would be lasting. Throughout these weeks, Harry and Meghan navigated a delicate balance, participating as required, managing public and media scrutiny, and protecting their children's privacy. Every document, testimony, and strategy session became a high-stakes moment in a trial that was unprecedented in scope and attention. Legal experts observed that the case combined technical forensic analysis with deeply personal narratives, creating a situation that was both procedurally complex and emotionally charged. As the courtroom sessions continued, observers noted that the trial was no longer just a legal proceeding. It had become a social and cultural phenomenon. It tested assumptions about privilege, accountability, and the boundaries of public and private life for the most famous family in the world. Each revelation, each expert testimony, and each public statement contributed to an intricate narrative that extended far beyond the legal questions at hand, capturing the attention of millions and leaving an indelible mark on the story of the modern British monarchy. The cumulative effect of these proceedings was both intense and transformative. For Harry and Meghan, the trial represented not just a legal challenge, but a confrontation with decades of public expectation, media scrutiny, and family dynamics. For the royal institution, it underscored vulnerabilities and tested the capacity to adapt to contemporary legal and societal norms. For the public, it offered a rare glimpse into the complex interplay of law, family, and celebrity, blending them. As the trial entered its third week, tensions in the courtroom reached unprecedented levels. Every day brought a new layer of complexity, new witnesses, and new revelations that seemed to redefine the stakes of the case. Legal analysts described this phase as the climactic convergence of the trial, where evidence, testimony, and public scrutiny collided to create a situation that was both legally significant and emotionally charged. Observers noted that the courtroom atmosphere had shifted. It was no longer just about procedural legality, but about personal accountability, public perception, and the future of the royal family. One of the most explosive moments came when a former senior palace official took the stand to testify about the so-called sealed clauses in key royal documents. The witness revealed that specific instructions, allegedly influenced by Prince Harry, had been placed to ensure that certain family members could not inherit titles or privileges under any circumstances. While the documents themselves remained confidential under court order, excerpts presented in testimony suggested a deliberate attempt to control succession and public image in a manner that bypassed traditional oversight. The revelations sent ripples through the courtroom, with Harry visibly tense and Meghan reportedly watching via secure video feed, her hands clasped tightly, face pale with concern. The prosecution seized on this testimony, emphasizing the alleged intentionality behind these actions. Lawyers argued that such clauses, if indeed orchestrated by Harry, could constitute an abuse of power and interference with established legal norms. They questioned why a senior royal would seek to control inheritance and titles in ways that contradicted long-standing royal protocols, framing it as both legally and ethically questionable. The defense countered vigorously, asserting that any instructions were procedural, intended to protect the family's interests, and not meant to subvert lawful succession. The back and forth left the courtroom charged with tension, each side attempting to sway not only the judge, but also the global audience following the trial. As the evidence pile grew, the media frenzy intensified. Headlines across the world ranged from sensationalist to analytical, with a mix of speculation, expert commentary, and leaked courtroom insights. Social media platforms became a non-stop hub of discussion, with users analyzing testimony clips, purported leaked documents, and even body language in courtroom footage. Memes emerged, news threads exploded with theories, and hashtags related to the trial trended globally for consecutive days. The court proceedings had effectively become a live spectacle, blurring the line between legal process and global entertainment. Amidst this, the personal toll on Prince Harry was starkly visible. Courtroom cameras captured moments where he struggled to maintain composure, often taking deep breaths, rubbing his forehead, or casting a glance toward the gallery. Friends and confidants outside the courtroom described him as walking a tightrope between legal necessity and emotional collapse. The pressure of potentially impacting his children's future, combined with intense media scrutiny and the relentless pace of proceedings, had created a unique psychological strain. Observers noted that even seasoned legal professionals would find such a situation overwhelming, highlighting the human dimension of this high-profile legal battle. Meghan's emotional journey was equally complex. From her secure location, she experienced a continuous stream of updates, witness accounts, and media analysis. Insiders described her as alternating between strategic focus and emotional overwhelm, often retreating for moments of solitude to process the developments. Legal counsel remained in constant communication, advising her on how to respond publicly, manage statements, and navigate any potential cross-examination. Despite the distance from the courtroom, Meghan's presence loomed large, her decisions and past actions frequently referenced in testimonies, and her public image repeatedly scrutinized in international media. The courtroom drama took an even more dramatic turn when a series of emails, text messages, and secure app communications were introduced as evidence. These messages allegedly revealed coordinated discussions about how royal titles, privileges, and public narratives should be handled. Some messages included phrasing that appeared ambiguous, leading to conflicting interpretations. The prosecution argued that such communications indicated deliberate planning and intent to manipulate official procedures. The defense maintained that the language was informal, context-dependent, and not indicative of criminal intent. This presentation of evidence became a focal point for journalists and commentators, who dissected every line for implications about the couple's intentions and motivations. In parallel, the global media landscape reacted with a mix of shock, intrigue, and controversy. Television networks dedicated continuous coverage to the trial, offering panel discussions, live analyses, and interviews with legal experts. Newspapers featured front-page stories with attention-grabbing headlines, while online platforms provided minute-by-minute updates, live-stream commentaries, and interactive polls. Analysts observed that public attention to this trial exceeded that of most contemporary royal events, underscoring the immense curiosity, fascination, and emotional investment that audiences had in the unfolding drama. Meanwhile, within the royal family, strategic communications intensified. Advisors coordinated press statements, emphasizing the family's adherence to tradition and legal compliance, while carefully avoiding any statements that could be construed as prejudgment. King Charles reportedly spent long hours reviewing legal analyses, consulting with senior aides, and preparing for potential media fallout. Prince William and Princess Anne were also deeply involved, providing counsel, ensuring that public messaging remained consistent, and monitoring both domestic and international reactions. These efforts reflected the broader concern for preserving the monarchy's integrity amid a trial that threatened to redefine public perceptions of royal responsibility and accountability. The psychological dimension of the trial continued to grow more pronounced. Observers noted that the sustained intensity of courtroom scrutiny, coupled with the global media attention, created a uniquely stressful environment. Experts on high-profile legal cases explained that individuals in such situations often experience heightened emotional volatility, fluctuating confidence, and moments of vulnerability, all of which could manifest in both public demeanor and private reflection. For Harry and Meghan, managing these psychological pressures became as critical as any legal strategy, requiring continuous monitoring, support, and careful communication. One particularly tense moment unfolded when a former palace advisor testified regarding conversations about succession planning and the management of royal privileges. The witness described instances in which Prince Harry had allegedly voiced concerns about maintaining the family's public image, protecting his children, and controlling the narrative surrounding sensitive documents. While some elements were framed as protective measures, the prosecution suggested they could be interpreted as coercive or manipulative, introducing questions of intent and legality. The courtroom atmosphere was electric, with observers noting the palpable tension as every word seemed to carry enormous weight. Simultaneously, Meghan's legal team worked tirelessly to ensure her narrative was accurately presented. They emphasized her role as a mother navigating a complex and high-pressure environment, arguing that any missteps were a function of situational stress rather than malicious intent. Public relations advisors coordinated statements highlighting her charitable work, media engagements, and advocacy efforts, aiming to balance negative portrayals with positive contributions. Despite these efforts, media speculation remained relentless, often focusing on personal attributes, past decisions, and hypothetical scenarios that extended beyond the evidence presented in court. As the trial progressed, the children, Archie and Lilibet, remained a central, if largely unseen, focus. Legal protections ensured they were shielded from direct exposure, yet discussions about their welfare, titles, and future continued to dominate courtroom dialogue and media coverage. Analysts highlighted the ethical challenges inherent in a case involving high-profile minors, noting the tension between public transparency and safeguarding the children's privacy. This dimension added another layer of complexity, as every procedural decision, piece of evidence, and strategic move had the potential to impact not only legal outcomes, but also the children's long-term well-being. The courtroom narrative also revealed layers of internal family conflict. Witnesses described tensions between siblings, divergent perspectives on public communication, and disagreements about strategic decisions. These accounts painted a picture of a family grappling with unprecedented scrutiny, legal challenges, and emotional strain. Analysts noted that such dynamics, when made public, could influence perceptions of credibility, integrity, and cohesion, further complicating the legal and reputational stakes for all involved. International observers also weighed in, with commentators from Europe, North America, and Asia providing analysis on the broader implications of the trial. Discussions focused on constitutional implications, the evolving role of monarchy in contemporary society, and lessons for other royal families navigating similar challenges. Academics and journalists debated whether the trial signified a structural shift in expectations for transparency, accountability, and public engagement, with some arguing it would set a lasting precedent for legal oversight of royal actions. During this intense period, Harry and Meghan's relationship with media outlets evolved in complex ways. On one hand, the couple continued to face relentless coverage, often framed in negative or sensationalist terms. On the other hand, strategically managed interviews and public statements provided opportunities to convey their perspective, humanize their experience, and influence public discourse. Navigating this duality required careful coordination between legal teams, media advisors, and close confidants, reflecting the intersection of law, personal narrative, and public perception in a high-profile trial. Courtroom proceedings increasingly highlighted contradictions, ambiguities, and the nuanced interpretation of evidence. Lawyers from both sides emphasized intent, context, and precedent, arguing that the meaning of communications, instructions, and decisions must be evaluated with careful attention to detail. Judges reminded the court that emotional interpretations, while understandable, could not replace objective analysis of facts. These reminders underscored the delicate balance between understanding human behavior and applying the rigid standards of law, a tension central to the trial's complexity. As media coverage reached a fever pitch, public opinion polls indicated a deeply divided global response. Some demographics expressed sympathy for Harry and Meghan, emphasizing the pressures of public life, media intrusion, and institutional rigidity. Others interpreted the evidence as a failure of judgment, questioning the couple's ethical standards and decision-making. Commentators noted that sentiment was particularly volatile, with spikes of support or criticism often tied to specific revelations, emotional moments, or strategic media interventions. Friends close to Prince Harry and Meghan, those within their inner circle, described an environment of constant vigilance, where every decision, every word, and every movement had the potential to be scrutinized, recorded, and broadcast globally. Personal relationships were tested, with confidants expressing frustration over the relentless pressure and high-stakes environment. Trusted aides often worked long hours, providing both practical support and emotional reassurance, attempting to shield the couple from complete psychological exhaustion. Insiders highlighted that while the couple projected composure publicly, moments of private vulnerability were frequent, including breakdowns, sleepless nights, and heated discussions about strategy. The media frenzy surrounding the trial contributed to an increasingly hostile public environment. Social media threads erupted with speculation, leaks, and commentary on every testimony, document, and exchange in court. Analysis videos on YouTube and streaming platforms dissected each moment, emphasizing microexpressions, body language, and choice of words. News outlets alternated between sensational headlines and measured analysis, while opinion columns debated the moral and ethical dimensions of the evidence. The pervasive global coverage created a psychological strain, as Harry and Meghan had to navigate not only legal scrutiny, but also the relentless narrative shaping of millions of observers worldwide. One of the most shocking developments emerged when a legal aid revealed that portions of previously undisclosed correspondence suggested attempts to control the narrative outside the courtroom. Emails and messages indicated coordinated strategies to influence media coverage, public perception, and even international commentary. While the defense framed these as necessary public relations measures, the prosecution painted a picture of manipulation, raising questions about transparency, accountability, and intent. This revelation provoked a mixture of outrage, intrigue, and intense discussion among legal analysts, journalists, and the public. The royal family faced its own set of challenges as the trial unfolded. Internal communications reflected growing concern about public perception, reputational risk, and the future of the monarchy. King Charles reportedly convened emergency meetings with senior advisors, legal experts, and communications teams to ensure a cohesive and legally sound response. Prince William and Princess Anne were involved in coordinating messaging, managing media interactions, and monitoring social media discourse, with the goal of maintaining consistency and mitigating potential backlash. Observers noted that these efforts required delicate balancing, protecting the institution, addressing legal realities, and preserving public trust while avoiding appearing reactive or defensive. The courtroom drama also had a deeply human dimension. Emotional moments during testimony underscored the personal stakes of the trial. At one juncture, a witness recounted a private conversation in which Prince Harry expressed concern for his children's welfare, fearing that public exposure of family details could lead to lasting harm. Meghan reportedly reacted with visible distress upon learning of this testimony, highlighting the deep intertwining of personal concern and legal strategy. Analysts noted that such moments illustrated the tension between human emotion and formal legal procedures, showing how personal narratives could influence perception and potentially sway opinions outside the courtroom. Evidence introduced during the trial began to paint a more comprehensive picture of the couple's actions over time. Photographs, documents, and witness testimonies revealed patterns of communication, decision-making, and strategic maneuvering. Some communications reflected a protective instinct toward family members, while others suggested calculated efforts to maintain control over titles, privileges, and public narratives. The prosecution emphasized the latter, framing the couple's actions as a deliberate attempt to reshape royal structures in ways that could be perceived as self-serving or manipulative. The defense countered, emphasizing context, intent, and the unique pressures of high-profile life, portraying the actions as pragmatic rather than malicious. Outside the courtroom, public reaction intensified. Opinion polls, social media discussions, and global commentary revealed a deeply divided response. Supporters emphasized the unprecedented scrutiny, relentless media intrusion, and pressures of public life, arguing that the couple had acted reasonably given the circumstances. Critics focused on perceived ethical lapses, the alleged manipulation of succession and privilege, and potential breaches of protocol. Analysts described the public reaction as both a reflection of deep societal fascination with royalty and a broader debate over accountability, transparency, and the role of modern media in high-profile legal matters. A particularly pivotal moment occurred when a former senior palace advisor provided testimony regarding succession planning and the management of royal titles. The witness described conversations suggesting that Prince Harry had concerns about preserving public perception, managing family image, and controlling the narrative surrounding sensitive documents. While some of the testimony reflected protective intentions, the prosecution argued that it could also indicate coercive planning or manipulation. The court's atmosphere was charged, with observers noting the heightened tension and the gravity of each word. The testimony prompted global discussion, with analysts dissecting the implications for both the couple and the monarchy. The impact on the children, Archie and Lilibet, remained a central concern throughout the trial. While legal protections ensured they were not present in court, discussions about their titles, inheritance, and privacy dominated multiple testimonies. Experts in child welfare and public scrutiny emphasized the ethical complexities of involving high-profile minors in legal disputes, noting that the stakes extended far beyond legal outcomes to include psychological well-being, privacy, and long-term social impact. Harry and Meghan's legal strategy consistently emphasized protective measures for their children, highlighting that decisions made under scrutiny were often guided by considerations of safety and security. Media coverage of the trial frequently highlighted contradictions and inconsistencies in testimony, leading to debates over credibility and intent. Legal analysts discussed how discrepancies could arise from context, memory lapses, or interpretive differences, while others argued that patterns of communication and decision-making suggested deliberate actions. The defense argued for a nuanced understanding of intent and the pressures of life in the public eye, emphasizing that actions must be evaluated within the unique environment of royal life. The prosecution maintained a focus on consistency, highlighting patterns that, in their view, pointed to calculated control over titles and privileges. As the trial progressed, attention also turned to the ethical and symbolic dimensions of the case. Scholars and commentators debated what the trial revealed about the monarchy's role in contemporary society, public expectations of transparency and accountability, and the evolving dynamics of royal life under global media scrutiny. Discussions considered whether the case represented a structural shift in public perceptions of royal responsibility, with potential implications for other high-profile families worldwide. Analysts observed that the trial had become more than a legal dispute. It was a cultural touchstone reflecting changing expectations of leadership, privilege, and accountability in a modern context. In parallel, Harry and Meghan's legal and communications teams coordinated to manage public perception. Carefully crafted statements emphasized their commitment to family welfare, adherence to legal standards, and dedication to charitable work. Media appearances were strategically planned, balancing the need for transparency with the importance of protecting personal boundaries and legal strategy. Despite these efforts, media scrutiny remained intense, with outlets dissecting every statement, body language cue, and implied meaning. The couple faced a constant balancing act, managing the narrative while avoiding overexposure or misinterpretation. The psychological toll of the trial became increasingly apparent. High-profile legal observers noted that prolonged scrutiny, global attention, and constant evaluation of actions could result in significant stress, anxiety, and emotional strain. Close aides described instances of private breakdowns, periods of emotional withdrawal, and heated discussions about strategic decisions. Managing these pressures required coordinated support from legal teams, mental health professionals, and trusted confidants, emphasizing the intersection of law, emotion, and public expectation in high-stakes proceedings. One of the most dramatic turns came when previously undisclosed documents were introduced that referenced potential interventions by the monarchy to control public narrative and succession planning. While the documents themselves were heavily redacted, the excerpts suggested strategic considerations regarding the management of titles, privileges, and public perception. The prosecution argued that these documents demonstrated intentional manipulation, while the defense highlighted the procedural, context-dependent nature of the documents, emphasizing that interpretation without full context could be misleading. This segment of evidence further intensified both courtroom drama and global media speculation. In the wake of these revelations, the royal family convened additional internal discussions. Advisors emphasized the importance of cohesive communication, legal compliance, and strategic messaging to maintain public confidence. Reports suggested that discussions focused not only on legal implications, but also on long-term reputational impact and the management of public perception. King Charles, Prince William, and Princess Anne were reportedly deeply involved in these deliberations, balancing family loyalty with institutional responsibility. Analysts noted that these measures reflected a heightened awareness of the interplay between legal outcomes and public opinion, particularly in a case of unprecedented global interest. The courtroom proceedings also highlighted differences in generational perspectives on privacy, public exposure, and institutional loyalty. Witnesses described contrasting approaches to media engagement, narrative control, and the handling of sensitive information, illustrating tensions within the royal family. These accounts underscored the complex dynamics of high-profile family relationships, where personal interests, institutional duties, and public scrutiny intersect in ways that complicate decision-making and magnify consequences. As the trial moved into its final phase, both sides prepared for closing arguments that would synthesize weeks of testimony, evidence, and cross-examination. Legal teams meticulously reviewed each statement, document, and witness account, crafting narratives designed to influence not only the judge, but also the global audience observing proceedings in real time. Observers anticipated a courtroom atmosphere thick with tension, emotion, and high-stakes anticipation, reflecting the unique convergence of legal, personal, and public elements in this unprecedented trial. Outside the courtroom, global reactions remained intense. News outlets continued to provide exhaustive coverage. Social media platforms were saturated with discussion, and public commentary often blended analysis with speculation. The trial had evolved into a cultural phenomenon, illustrating the intersection of legal scrutiny, media fascination, and personal narrative in the contemporary age. Analysts emphasized that the case would have long-term implications for public expectations of accountability, the role of media in shaping perception, and the evolving responsibilities of high-profile individuals in the global spotlight. Amid unprecedented scrutiny, their legal team worked tirelessly, balancing aggressive defense tactics with careful management of sensitive information. Court filings were meticulously crafted to counter allegations, while simultaneously protecting the privacy and well-being of Archie and Lilibet. Each motion, objection, and submission was analyzed not just for its legal implications, but for the potential public perception and media fallout. Observers noted that this dual consideration created a layer of complexity rarely encountered in conventional legal disputes, blending law, public relations, and personal strategy into a high-stakes operational challenge. The defense placed significant emphasis on illustrating the unique pressures of life under global scrutiny. Testimonies highlighted the intrusive nature of media attention, the pervasive impact of paparazzi activity, and the constant monitoring by social media audiences. Experts in public life and psychological well-being were called to discuss the mental and emotional challenges faced by individuals subjected to unrelenting global observation. The defense argued that many of the alleged irregularities or strategic maneuvers were responses to this extreme pressure rather than intentional breaches of protocol. Analysts noted that this approach aimed to humanize the couple in the eyes of both the court and the global audience, providing context to actions that might otherwise appear calculated or manipulative. The prosecution, meanwhile, maintained a firm focus on patterns of behavior that, in their view, indicated intentional control and manipulation of titles, privileges, and public perception. They presented chronological evidence of communications, documents, and strategic decisions that suggested a consistent effort to manage outcomes in a way that benefited the couple personally. Legal analysts observed that the prosecution's strategy relied heavily on demonstrating intent through a pattern of actions, rather than isolated incidents, aiming to show that decisions were calculated rather than circumstantial. This approach heightened the tension in court and fueled widespread public debate about the couple's motivations and ethics. Outside the courtroom, media coverage intensified, with every development being dissected, analyzed, and broadcast across multiple platforms. Traditional news outlets, social media channels, and streaming commentary shows engaged in a relentless cycle of updates, speculation, and interpretation. Headlines ranged from measured reporting of courtroom proceedings to sensationalized claims about personal motives and family dynamics. The constant coverage amplified public engagement and scrutiny, contributing to a global conversation that extended far beyond the legal proceedings themselves. The intense media attention placed additional emotional strain on both Harry and Meghan, who had to navigate the dual pressures of legal compliance and public perception management simultaneously.